In this video, we're going to focus on how we can always show the tooltip on our pie chart. And here we're going to focus on how we can create rounded borders on it. And the rounded borders is slightly more tricky because we need to draw a line step by step. However, this will be a very interesting item to learn in drawing in the canvas. So let's start to explore how to do this. In this video, we're going to focus on how to always show tooltips with rounded borders on a pie chart in Chartjs. And this question came from many other people who wanted to have this. So let's start and work on that right now. So to do this, what we first need to do is we need to go to chartjs3.com, getting started. And you might notice this here, for some reason my Google Chrome gives this error. But what we need here is the default code. So if you scroll down here, eventually you will see this nice chunk of code. I'm going to copy, not everything, but except all the code only. Copy this code. And if you want to understand what the code does, make sure you watch this video here that explains the JavaScript of it. So what I'm going to do is I'll paste that in there and cut out the title, put the title in here. And then we save this and refresh, and there we are. So now we have a bar chart. So what I'm going to do now is to quickly convert it into a pie chart. I want to make sure that the width will be 500 because it will be a square shape. Next, I'm scrolling down here, and then I will say here pie chart. And then here for the scales, we don't have any scales, so we can remove all the scales setting. Save this, refresh. There we are. Alright, so now we have this. What I want to do is I want to remove the legend, because if we will have tooltips always here showing, we don't need to have really the legend. It has no meaning anymore. Next, after that, later on, I will be removing the tooltip hover effect because it will be always showing, so this tooltip will be interfering with it. And what we're really doing is this. You need to understand, if you look at this tooltip and if I hover over, you see the tooltip jumps from one side to the other. And if I go here, you can see it jumps from blue all to black, and there you are. So what this really means is Chartjs, in Chartjs version 3, they removed the tooltip in such a way that it's only one tooltip that moves around. In Chartjs 2, they had the tooltip in every item, so you would not see this moving effect. But they have done this because it's more efficient. But that would mean that they only have one tooltip that moves around based on hover, which is fine. But now for us, we have a problem because this doesn't work. So this means we need to create our own tooltip. So basically, we'll be building our own shapes, putting everyone or each of these shapes in the right center of this pie chart here. And from there on, we can start working on and then putting the data in here. So for that, we eventually have to remove a few items or remove the tooltip. But let's first remove the legend and then start working on it. So I'm going to say here plugins. And in the plugins, I'm going to say here legend. And in the legend, I'll say here display. And this will be set on false. Once I did this, save this, refresh. You can see here now, we removed that. This is important because we're going to use the coordinates here. If you would have a legend, in that case, your coordinates later on might be different. Anyway, don't worry about that. We're going to focus on it later on. So what I want to do now first is, of course, here you can see here this curly braces, the plugin. We put a comma here, and we're going to create now a new plugin. So we say plugins, and this plugins will be the variable, and what we can use here, let's say rounded border tooltip plugin basically. So this will be a rounded border tooltip. This here, we're going to say here block or plugin rounded border, and then we say here constant. So constant will be equals to this because this is basically a constant variable, so it should be in there. Alright, the next thing we want to do here is you can say your ID with this, although optional in this case because we will not do anything in here in the options, so it doesn't matter so much, but I'll just leave it in there. This is a bonus. And then what I'm going to say here, when would we like to draw the tooltip, or basically our own tooltips? Well, basically we want to always draw it, but we want to draw it at the very end. And by drawing, I mean the timing of drawing. So I'm going to say after draw. Why does this matter? Is because you can see here, there's like a structure of drawing. And you have these slices here, and if you would draw the slices before the tooltip, what will happen is the tooltip will be behind this and might be not visible because this might be a solid color. So then you will not see your tooltip anymore. So this draw timing is very important. So what I really want to do is here the draw timing should be at the very last moment. because the tooltip should be always on top. Think about layers. Alright, once we did this, I want to put in here some variables or arguments. So I'm going to say a chart, this is important, arguments and options. So these are our parameters, that's the right term, the parameters. And basically, if you do a console log, you will see here chart would be the most important parameter for us. If I refresh, then open up the developer tab, you will see here now we get here a lot of information. If I click on all of this, you get all the information that we need. Alright, so this is basically from the chart itself. So what we're going to do now is basically here, I'm going to say a ctx.save. And what this ctx.save really does is basically save all the variables that we have grabbed in here so we can start using them. And here, what we're going to do now is I'm going to create here a function. This function will eventually be later on for drawing, for example, our item. And what we need to draw here is the following. Let me just remove the console log here, save that, refresh. Alright, and this is of course not allowed. Save that and refresh as well. Let's see, do we have that? Alright, that's fair enough. I guess here this I have to do just show something, but doesn't matter. But what I really want to do is the following first. So we have two items here. Basically we have the carrot, which is this triangle here. We call this the carrot, and we have the tooltip cloud, which is rounded borders. And rounded borders in Canvas is quite tricky to work on. It's easier if you see my other video about the squares, which is this one here, where you create rectangles. It's very easy, but having rounded borders exactly same like this is extremely tricky because we need to work with a lot of codes or structuring and calculations here. So what we're going to do is the following. So let's start work, and let me solve this first here. I realize that this one here is missing a certain item, which is our constant with ctx, because we have here the ctx, but its reference is to nowhere. So we say here a object destructuring, which will be basically the ctx that we want to grab, which is inside our chart. So normally we have this, then we have to do like this, ctx.chart. But now what I do is I want to break it down, and I just want to use shortcut of ctx instead of repeating ctx.chart. So we have that one there. Alright, so once we did this, we have that, we can continue on. So what I'm going to do here first is let's work with creating, well, what we have to do is we need to grab first the data sets, and we need to get the exact location. This exact location is basically where the carrot here points to. And this is very important, so let's do this first. So to do this, what I need to do here is I need to loop through every data set. Luckily we only have one data set, and in the data set I need to go into the data points. Basically the data here, which I will call the data points because they have the point values here. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to say a chart dot data, or maybe what I will do first is just a console log, and just show here again chart. And you will see where we're going. So if I hover over, you will see this. Alright, it shows certain values. Say chart.data, and the data is in here. You can see this is the data object, and then in here we can go to data sets, and we can say here for every data set we have, we only have one, which is data set 0. In that case, show this. Alright, so that's what we want to do here first. So I'm going to say here the following, chart.data sets dot, and then for each. So we will loop through every data set. Since we only have one, there's not much looping necessary, but still what I want to do here, I'm going to say here parentheses twice, then data set comma I. Once I did this, we're going to make here a callback function. So that's why this is what we call a function arrow expression. And then in here, make sure the curly braces are between here. So in here, we're going to say the following. So we have the data set, which is basically every data set we have here, and this is the index number. So we'll loop through every one, but there's only one index here, or 0, index 0, so that's only one here, so it doesn't matter so much. And within here, we do another for each, but then specifically not for the data sets, but for the data points. So if I scroll down here to the data object, I want to say here now the data points, data sets. All right, and then here the data itself. So this is what I want to grab, and for each of these we'll grab here eventually the x and y coordinates of the tooltip. So that's what we're going to do next. So I'm going to say here the following. To do this, I need to do first here chart.get data set meta, and maybe it would be even good here to show you that the data, you have get data set meta. So let's search here for chart, and then we say here let's see, where are you? Get. Do we see that here? No, I'm not able to find it right now. So if I see here get data, let's see, doesn't work. Alright, fair enough, doesn't matter so much. So what I want to do basically here is chart, and then what I want to say here, get data set meta, then here the I, which is the index number, and then from here on what I will say is data dot for each, and then in here we do exactly the same as upper, except instead of data set we will name this our data point, because it's basically the value. Now we say comma here. Now just to avoid confusion, I don't want to use another I, we just name this index. So this is also I for index, but this is index for the data set, and this is now index for the values in our data array here, basically this one here. So now we have this here, then of course another function arrow expression, and then within here we're going to loop. To do this, I'm going to say constant, and I'm going to break again, do a object destructuring, because what I want to grab now is the specific items. And before I even continue on, I see here I forgot to put a dot. Make sure you put a dot in here. So get data set I, and then dot data. And here what I want to say was here, data destructuring, I want to grab the x and the y values, and these are from our data point dot tooltip position. Basically this will indicate what is the position of the tooltip. So let's grab this one as well, and just for the sake of it, do a console log and show you what's going on here. Save this, refresh. Alright, we got a lot of items. I want to remove this console log here. Save that, refresh. There you are. So now we get the x and y values for all of these items. And if I hover over this blue one here, most likely it's 200 plus plus by y 135 plus plus. So all of this here is very useful for us, because now we can really grab these points and start working with it. So what I'm going to do now is the following. I have this here. We have already the x and y. So all we need now is basically indicating that. So to make it simple, I'm going to draw something here. So I'm going to say here, let's say here, fill style. So I'm going to make a simple rectangle. This rectangle will be just put in here to look and confirm our positioning, if it's exactly at the same location as our caret pointer. So we're going to say here, fill style should be equal, but then need to make sure that this is CTX. So this is basically our rectangle or square what we're going to make, and this will be, let's make this black, and then here I'm going to say CTX, and then I'll say here fill rectangle, and this one will be of course in parentheses, and here we get the four coordinates, the x, y, basically it's the x, the y, and then we have the height, the width and the height here. So these two, we can just use this one here. Now in this case these are identical, so that's fine, and just say here I want to make a cube, so 10 pixel, or a square 10 pixel by 10 pixel. But this is basically eventually based on whatever we have here looped. So if I save this now and refresh, there you are, and look, you can see here now we are pointing exactly at the same location here, always at the left corner up. Beautiful. So now we have this here. And this is all fine, but I don't want to eventually put it in here. What I really want to do here is I want to make a function that is probably a more better way and more cleaner way in this loop, so it will reduce the loading time of the loop. So if I would do here, I would do basically this. And later on we're going to work on the caret. So we're going to make the caret as well, but I just want to grab this, show you how we're going to do this now. This is a bit more better way to do than what I showed in one of my other videos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of this, and then I'm going to say here, function. Let's call this a square for now. And then here, we're just going to put in these values. And these values here will be based on x, y. These are x and y. And then later on, we have maybe the width and the height. We need to work on that as well. But for our square, doesn't matter so much. And then here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say square. And this square, x and y, this is our function. We'll grab, of course, here the x and y value. So don't get confused. These are just parameters. And these parameters are basically referred to these numbers here. But these numbers are solid numbers based on this here. So it will loop through this. And if I save this, it should work nicely, and there you are. You can see here now we switched a bit, but we make sure that the loop here has lesser code, which is better for us. Alright, so now we have this. You understand this already. So now what I want to do is, of course, let's work on the caret, because the caret is more important. The caret is basically very similar. So I'm going to say a caret. That's a triangle. If I refer to caret, that's this triangle here. And first of all, I want to change the color. The color here is RGBA, which is a string value, by the way. And then this is 0, 0, 0, which is black, 0.8. 80% transparency, or sorry, 80% visibility and 20% transparency. Basically, they call the alpha value basically 0.8, or the opacity 0.8. Alright, so we have this here. Everything is just same. Everything is fine. Alright, that works. But now let's start to change this. So we have to draw here now our triangle. And the triangle is slightly more tricky because we need to work with line, and then later on we're going to work on the real hard one. So in the triangle, we have the fill, we keep that one, and then here we're going to say, instead of fill rectangle, we're going to say here now ctx dot. And then we say here, begin path to draw the triangle here. So this basically means we're going to draw a triangle. And then we're going to say here again ctx, context with ctx, and then move to with capital T, and then here we're going to say what is our starting point coordinates. So what I want to do, our starting point will be basically the dot here. Basically, that's our starting point. So I will say here that is the x and y, because that is our starting point. Once we have this, we need to make another one, which is a ctx, and then we say line 2, and the line 2 will do the following. The line 2 is working on basically this. So we want to go to the line, but then what I want to do is I want to point up. So what I really want to do eventually is this tooltip. This should be up here, like this. But I'm going to remove the tooltip afterwards. So I'm just going to show you here what I'm talking about. Here we're going to say a tooltip. Then we say here, y align. Then we say here, bottom. So if I say that, what will happen is the caret will point down. If I refresh, let's see, alright, we get an error, and the reason why we get an error is because this here is still not really functioning. So I'm going to make sure that this all is commented out for now. Oh, it gives us, of course, another issue. So let's do this, save that, refresh, does that work? Alright. So this is basically what I want. The tooltip points now down, and this is the dot here we need to grab, which is the x and y. So let's go back here. I'm going to remove the rectangle fill, because we don't need that one, we're not making a rectangle. And here I'll just change that one, and this will be now called caret. Alright, so here, tooltip, I want to say here, enable, because we don't need the tooltip anymore. It's not clear what I want, and you probably can imagine what we want to do. So I say enable false. Alright, so that will mean that if we hover over the tooltip later on, it will not show anymore, so it will avoid the confusion. So we have this now here, and then we say the line. So what I really want to do is basically like this. If we start here, we need to go up here and then to the left. So that will mean there will be a little bit of basically going up in the y. So it means a negative y going up, and then here to the left will be negative x. Remember, x would be the horizontal line, and the y is the vertical line. If we want to go up, here up is 0, and this is 350 or 500 pixels because it's a square. So if you go more down, you will increase to increasing eventually till you reach 500. So what we want to do is, instead of here, maybe this would be, let's say, we can see here, if I'm not mistaken, Y value should be 135, as you can see. So if you need to go up probably 5 pixels, so minus 5 pixels, meaning that Y would be 130 instead of 135. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is just very simple. I'm going to say this minus 5, and the X, because I want to go to the left side, I'll say minus 5 as well. Once I did this, I want to do the opposite direction as well. I'll say here plus 5. What will basically mean is that we start here, we go up and then minus 5, and then later on it's plus 5, so we go back to 0 and then plus 5, and there we are. So that will make our triangle here. So once we have this, I'll say ctx fill. So we fill up the color here. If I save this now, let's refresh and look, there we are. So now we have our triangle here, or carrot. So that's the first one. So the next thing what I need to do here is eventually get the tooltip cloud, basically the upper cloud. But to get this, I need to first measure the text that we want to show. So we need to build the text first. So I'm going to build the text here, and the text will cover certain items. So what we're going to grab here first is to figure out what are we going to show in the text. So I'm going to say here constant, and this constant will be text. And here we just have to think, what do I want to show here? Well, basically what I want to show here is the value, basically like this. You can see here we get the Monday, and then I want to grab the number 18. So what I want to show here is basically this. Monday, colon, 18, and that's it. So I need to know here how many pixels is this. So we need to know how many pixels we have here in width, so we can measure the official width of this. So this is very important. So let's start and work on that. So we have our text here, and what we need to do is we need to first get this text dynamic. So we go to text dynamic. How do we do this? Well, we can grab this basically from our chart data, because we have here, and we are in here the data sets, and all we need is basically chart data here. And let's do a console log. Save this, and I'm going to remove this console log now. We don't need that one there. Do we have any other console log? No. Alright, so let's save this, refresh. So you can see here we get all of these numbers here, but if I click on this, you can see here for the labels is beautiful because we get all of the numbers here, or all the values here. So what I want to do is I want to grab the labels, and then we get here the index number. And remember, we had this one here, and this will help us with the index numbers. So if I say here dot labels, colon, or sorry, not colon, but brackets, index. If I save this now, refresh, you can see here we get all of these names. So what I want to do here, of course, this is the first one that I want to put in here. So what we need to do next is, well, we can just copy this. I'll just copy that and we put it in here. Let's do this one here, and then we just hit plus, and then we concatenate this. Alright, so that's the first part. So the next thing what I need to do, of course, is to grab the value. And this is a concatenation here, and this will be eventually a variable as well. So how do we get the value here? Well, let's go back here into our data. We're going to save this, refresh, click on this, and then you can see here, if we go to data sets, we grab in here, and then we can go here into data. So our data sets will be index number, and then the data here. So that will mean here we have this data sets index number. So that will be basically here, this, and then we can say this dot data set, sorry, not data set, but data sets. And then we say here the I, so that will grab the entire data set, but then I want to do here dot data, and then of course index number of this for loop here. Doing this, save that, refresh, grab us all the values here. Beautiful. So now we have that. I'm going to copy this, put it in here. Then I will say here plus, just for concatenation, and put in this specific item. So we know now the text. So if I save this, and if I console log the text, but I need to make sure that this here goes down, we should grab here now the text that we want. There you are. You can see here matching text with the matching values. So now what we want to do here is to measure this in pixels. So how do we do this? Well, luckily the canvas has a nice command for that. So in this we're going to say here the following. I'm going to say a constant, and this will be called the text width. The text width will be equal to the following. We say ctx dot measure text with caps lock T or capital T, and then in here the measure text will grab, of course, our text dot width. Grabbing this will mean now if I do a console log on the text width, we will have now the official width of the text in pixels. If you refresh here, you can see here all of these values, and I will accept this as true. And we can eventually see that once we are drawing our rounded border tooltip cloud. So now what we want to do here, now we have this here. We have this official measurement. We can now work with the next item. So what I want to do now is basically create what I call here the rounded rectangle shape. Let's call it a rounded rectangle, and then here, let's say here round rec, this will be our function. So this function here will be put in here as well. So we say here, this is not anymore rectangle, it was a caret. Let's say here rounded or round rec. So we say here function, and then we say here round rec, and the round rec will be equal to. So we're going to work on this now. We're going to look at what's going on here. Alright, so what we need to do here, and this is the most tricky part. So we need to get a few things. We need to know the width, we need to know the height, and we need to know also the rounded border radius, because we need to make a rounded corner here. And this would mean that we make a line, and then we make a separate line with the rounded one, which requires a quadratic curve. This is really tricky one, because you have to really think. Every item we have to sort. Alright, so I'll just close this. So that would mean the following. Well, we need, first of all, we need the x and y positioning. Yeah. So, well, these are the two values we anyway need. These are the ones we always need. But what we also need to know is the width. We need to know the height, and we need to also define the border radius effect. So we need to have here what we call our radius. So we have these here, and now let's start to work that in here as well. So how do we calculate these, or how do we do this? Well, here we have to look at a few items, because this eventually will be the most tricky one. So we're going to say here the following. We need to calculate here, I guess we say here, then we have the y, and then what we want to do here next would be we need to have the width of that as well. So how do we calculate the width? Well, for now I will make it quite simple, and then I will just say here the width will be text width, and then we need to have the height here. So for the height, this will be easier because it will be based on our font size. So let's say our font size will be 12 pixels. So I'm going to go and put in here 20 pixels in height. So we have enough margin around there. And then next, the border radius. In our case, 5 pixels would be more than sufficient. So if I save this now and refresh, of course nothing happens yet. And the reason why nothing happened, of course, we didn't draw anything. So now let's start to draw with this. So for this, I'm going to say your constant. And this constant will be the right position. And the right position is basically the x plus the width, how many pixels in width, because we need to know the starting point and the ending point in pixels. So that's basically the right. So I'm going to call this our r. So the r would be the x plus width, which makes sense, which is the text width here. So x plus text width would indicate the starting point here to the ending point somewhere there. Alright, so once we have this one, or at least we have this value now, another one is of course the bottom. We need to figure out the bottom. And the bottom is basically the y version minus, or sorry, the y plus height. So, alright, so now we have these two. So now let's start to draw and give it first a color. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to grab just the color here. It's going to grab this, put in there. And then we're going to begin with the path. So we need to make it line by line. So I'm going to say here line by line. And what we need to do here is we have our fill style. because we're going to have a full color. And then what I want to say, begin path, and then where are we going to start? So what we can do here is we're going to start on the following. This is a very important one because the border radius has basically three parts at the upper part. We have the rounded effect, we have the line between that, and then we have another rounded effect. These are considered three lines. So then when you go down, you have another line, and then when you have the border effect, that's basically a curved line, that's another one, and then here, and there, and then we go up. So then we have to make a full circle. So basically you have 8 lines to create a border radius. So, or a border radius, or a rounded rectangle basically. So what we're going to do here, we're going to start, but I'm going to start with a straight line. So pay attention here because this is really tricky one. I'm going to say this plus the radius, and the radius is basically a pixel of 4. So basically we're going to start with a point where the line is straight, and we're going to skip for now the rounded radius at one side. And then later on we're going to draw it step by step. And then we're going to say here, comma, y. So this will be our first item. So once we did this, what I want to do next is then ctx, and then I will say here, line 2, and then here what we're going to do is the radius, sorry, not the radius, the r. The r would be basically the right side. That's this one here, because this is the starting point. So now I'm going to draw our line to this minus the radius effect. So that will mean here minus the radius, and this radius is only 4 pixels, and you will see later on why. Then here, comma, y, and let's do this. And what I want to do here is just do a ctx fill. So if I save this now, refresh, let's see if we get a line here. Alright, we don't get a line yet, that's a pity. So what am I missing? Am I missing something here? No, not yet. Alright, so what we're going to do now is then to make the next item. So what we're going to do, the item is now is the curved line. So basically, in essence, what we did was we started here somewhere to make this straight line here. Now we're going to make a curved line. Once we have the curved line, we should probably see the shape. So we're going to do this. We have this line here. And then what I want to do here is say ctx dot quadratic curve 2. So pay attention to capital C, capital T. And then here we have basically what we're going to draw is only that curved moment, because it's only 4 pixels in width and 4 pixels in height, or 5 pixels, sorry. We have here the radius of 5 pixels. So that's the only thing we're going to do. So we're saying here the following. We will say here the radius, or the r, that's the right side. And then we're going to say here, go to the y. And then we say here again, comma, r, comma, y, minus, plus radius. So this would mean we go here, we go this, and do this radius effect as well here. Colon, save this, refresh, let's see if we have something now. Alright, so we get something. Of course the position is not 100%, don't worry, we're going to work on that. But now you can see here we create a straight line and we create the curve effect. So now what we need to do is to make the next line going down. So this part is slightly easier because basically here all we have to do here is now is ctx.line2, because what we need to do is just the straight line going down, and then after we're going to work on the curve again. So we're going to say here, fill, no, sorry, not fill, I need to go here to the line 2. And then this line 2 will be the following. The line 2 will be the right side minus the radius, which is basically the 5 pixels, comma, y. So if I save that, refresh, you can see here. Alright, so now it does something here, although it's slightly off, I guess. Let me double check if we are on the right location. I think we are slightly missing something. Yes, of course, I notice here immediately what we're missing is the following. So we have here the right side. So we are on the right side, and this is incorrect here. So we need to say a comma y. Let's remove that. And then we say plus the height. So this will basically make sure that we're going down in 20 pixels in height. And what we need to do here as well, minus the radius of 5 pixels. If I save that, this should give us the right effect. All right, there we are. So now this works, but now, of course, again, the curved line segment. So in here, basically, you can almost copy this one. We're going to say CTX quadratic curve 2. And here, now basically, we need to create a curve going back to the left side. So what we need to do here is the following. We're going to say here, the right side at the bottom, comma, or right, comma, bottom. And then we say here, again, right, minus radius. And then we say here, comma, B. All right. So if I save that, refresh, let's see what we get. There we are. So now what happened is we're now moving, creating again another line. So now we make a straight line again. And the straight line will be basically ctx.line2. And then in here, what we need is the following. We need to go back to the x value. So we're going to say here x, comma, basically not x comma, but we say x plus the radius of 5. So we say plus the 5 because the radius of 5 will be later calculated in the quadratic curve again. And then here we're going to say the location would be the y plus height. Save that, refresh. There we are. So now we get this, and then we still need to make 3 more items. We need to make the curve here, up, and then also we need to reposition it in the center and up here. So we have some work to do. So once we did this, enter. And then what I want to do here is the following. We have another quadratic curve, so ctx dot, I guess we can just copy this here, and then what I'm going to say here to this will be, we're going to the x, and then what I want to do here, comma bottom, comma x, comma bottom minus the radius, and this will eventually push it now nicely. There we are. As you can see here, we get that, and then almost done now up here, and then after that the final radius item. So we're going to say here ctx.line2, and then we have this. So what we want to do here, basically we want to go to the x, and then the x, what we have to do here, plus I guess the radius. Am I correct? Yes, the x plus radius. We do this, and oh sorry, this is not plus radius. We need to just go x because we want to go straight up, and then later on we will do the radius. So we say that, and then we say the y value plus radius. Save that. There you are. So alright, so the final corner, which would be a quadratic curve again, here ctx dot quadratic curve 2. Then here the final option here, this will be x plus or comma y. Then we say here x plus the radius of 5 pixels, and then we say here comma y. So once we have this, we should have now the right shape. Save that, refresh, and there we are. So alright, so this was quite tricky. We have still some work to do. And let's see here. And I realize that here, we have to check later on if this text here will be that correct, because this looks quite narrow, but that's alright. We're going to check on that. So we have this here. So what I want to do now, the very next thing is to position it correctly. So let's push this up here. So that will mean that we need to play around with the y value. So what is the y value here? Let's look here. I guess the best way to calculate the y value here is just to deduct this. Well, probably 20 pixels if I save that. We're going up. Alright, that is correct, but we need to do a bit more because this caret has also 5 pixels. So I'm going to say here minus 25. I save that. There we are. Alright, so now we need to push in the center. To do that, we need to basically calculate here the y. But how we do that is we need to calculate the y, but also the text width. But the text width, if we just deduct that, will push us too much. You can see at the very end. So we need to have the half of it. So we need to divide the text width first. Basically in mathematics here, so we divide it by 2. And basically in mathematics, this will be prioritized before this, but just to make sure, save that, refresh. There we are. Alright, so we have this here. One thing I question here is the width here of this one. Because if we would have Monday plus a number, this would be far longer. And this is the text width, and let's see here what I did. We have this. And we have the text width label and that. Alright. Somehow, well, we'll see later on. Once we draw the text as well, we can see if this is really correct or maybe I'm missing out on something. Let's see. So what we need the next one is we have this. Let's put in the text here. Basically, our positioning is correct. So let's start to draw our text. So the text, this is very important. I want the text. This is the timing. This is referring to timing. I want the text on top of the tooltip cloud. So that will mean that the last thing that we're going to draw is the text. While we grab here the text information, we don't want to draw the text here because what will happen is this will be on top of the text, and then will be the text makes hard to read or will be overlapped by this. So what I'm going to do here is the text, and then we're going to draw the text here. And to draw the text, what we're going to say here, well, let's say simple. I'm going to make a text label. And this text label is a function as well. So I'm going to say here, alright, put in here, I'm going to say function text label. And this text label should do the following, or should have the following parameter. What we need to have here is basically the text or the label, let's call it the label, comma the x, comma the y value. So we have this here because this will eventually define the positioning or where it will start. But then I will say here, first of all, ctx.font size, or font, equals, we can say here 12, let's say 15 pixels is fine. Arial. Next thing what I want to do is I want to make this sure that this will have a different color. So I say fill text style, or ctx fill style equals white font. Make sure that this is a string value as well. Once we have that, ctx, and then we want to have the final one is the fill text, which would be eventually almost similar to our parameters here. So what will be our parameter here? I'll just say here, this will be the item. So we have here the text. Basically the text should be this one here. I'm going to grab this text, comma the x and comma the y. And most likely the x should be also divided by 2. So we're going to see that right now. So you say here label comma x comma y, exactly the same, except here we have still some values. Save that, refresh, and there you are. Alright, you can see here we get some issues here, but that's alright, you're going to fix on that. Let's solve this positioning first. So I'm going to say here this width, if I do here, the x should be minus, we can just copy this here, most likely this is exactly the same. Save that. There we are. Alright, so that works. The next thing what I want to do here is to say the y value must be increased. Is that with minus 25, or differently, let's do minus 25 first. Save that, refresh. Alright, that's not it. So we need to basically be in here. So let's say minus 10. Oh, sorry, that's not what I wanted. Minus 10. Save that, refresh. There we are. So now we get this, and this will fit. But what I would like to do here is this space here should be a bit more bigger, so it will fit a bit more better because it's too cramped. So what I'm going to do in here, we have here the text width, and the text width could be here. Edit, let's say plus 10 pixels. Save that, refresh. Alright, so now we have an issue here. We need to do here plus 10 pixels. So what we should do here is, if we do here plus 10 on the text width, should be here as well. So what I'm going to do is plus 10 here. Prioritize this first to add on or to sum this, and then divide by 2. If I save this, refresh, and there we are. So now we have our nice design here. As I indicated, this was a quite tricky one, but eventually this here with the function will organize it as well nicely, and this is how you can play around with this. So if you enjoyed this video and maybe you want to make even clickable slices so that when you click on it, it will show something else, I have a nice video regarding that will show you exactly how you can create clickable slices. When you click on it, it will redirect you to a different link and it will depend on the slice that you click on. So extremely interesting as well to learn.